Imagine you're a farmer living some 2,700 years ago in Israel. You've had a terrific year. You had nice weather during the planting season. Your oxen were strong and healthy and pulled the plow well. The rain fell when it was supposed to, and your crops grew in abundance. You planted wheat and other grains. You planted tomatoes, carrots, lettuce, maybe some broccoli. You tended your fruit trees, and you're now harvesting your spring fruit and vegetables. You can't believe how well the crops have grown this year. Wagon loads of food. You take some of the first fruits that you have just harvested and you set them aside because you are going on a pilgrimage. You're going to Jerusalem to see the great temple of our people. There you take your basket of fruit and you climb the steps leading majestically up to the Temple Mount. You're in line with many other Jews who are making this very same pilgrimage. The line moves slowly forward. Now it's your turn. You enter the temple gate, walk up to the priest officiating that day. You set your basket of fruit down next to the priest, and now you're going to offer a prayer to God. What should you say? Thank you, God, for bringing the rain at the right time. Thank you for giving my animals good health when I needed them. Thank you for giving me and my family good health. Thank you for creating such a beautiful world, a world that miraculously brings forth fruits and vegetables from little seeds, some dirt and water. Thank you for making everything just right so that all my hard labor during the past year has paid off so well. You might want to say any or all of those things, but the Torah tells the farmer to say something else. The opening words of our Torah portion today describe this very scene, the farmer bringing his or her first fruits to the temple in Jerusalem, setting that basketful down in front of the priest, and then the farmer says the following: "My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt with only a small clan to settle for a short time. There he became a great big nation. But the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They burdened us with crushing labor. We cried out to the Lord, the God of our ancestors, and the Lord heard our plea and saw our plight and our misery and our oppression. The Lord freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with awesome power and by signs and wonders. He brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And therefore I now bring the first fruits of the soil which you, O Lord, have given me." Wow. What's going on here? Why the history lesson? What does all that have to do with bringing a basket of fresh strawberries or peaches or carrots? It seems to me the Torah is trying to teach us a number of important lessons. First, whatever we manage to do in our lifetimes, whatever our achievements or accomplishments, we need to put them in a broader context. Our history as a people stretches back thousands of years. Our accomplishments, whatever they are only the latest chapter of a very, very long story. Similarly, our relationship with God as a people has a long history, from Abraham, who was a wandering Aramean, leaving his father's home at God's request for an unknown place where he would be a stranger in a strange land, to Jacob, who survived a difficult life with lots of family intrigue, some of which he brought upon himself. But throughout the difficult times, he never lost his faith in God. To our enslaved ancestors in Egypt who cried out for God's help. To Moses, who saw God with the clearest vision of any prophet and who led our people out of slavery. To the rabbis of the Talmud and the Middle Ages. To our own people today, including us right here in this sanctuary this morning. Our relationship with God has been a constant beacon for our people, guiding us in the right path. At times when we celebrate our own personal accomplishments, the Torah suggests we should remind ourselves of this long and rich history that we have with God, and recognize that this is the same God with us today who was with our ancestors thousands of years ago, the same God with whom we celebrate our success and with whom we are consoled in our losses. The second important message of this statement is that while we celebrate what may seem to be our own personal achievements, we must also particularly remember the really hard times our people experienced in the past. Remember our wandering ancestral family, a tiny cluster of kinfolk in a harsh environment with little hope of surviving, let alone becoming a small but historically important people. Remember the slavery in Egypt and our freedom and redemption by God. Why should we remember this difficult past at a time of great joy for our present-day accomplishments? I think there are several reasons for doing so. First, if God had not nurtured that small family of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Leah, and Rachel, we wouldn't be here today. Second, if God had not taken us out of slavery, we might be here today, but we would still not be able to enjoy the fruits of our own labor. All our efforts would be for someone else's benefit. The only way we can bring a basket of fruit to celebrate with is if we are a free people able to earn our own living. And third, and related to those first two ideas, is that because we are miraculously alive today as a free people only because of God's inspiration and guidance throughout our people's long history up until this very day, because of that, everything we earn is due to God's graciousness. God brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey, a land where we could work hard and be successful. God created that land in the first place, and God created us with minds that can think and dream and build. And God created us with bodies that can manipulate our environment and carry out the ideas our minds invent. However skillful we might think we are, whatever success we might attain, everything is a result of God's gifts to us. And that's why a few weeks ago we read in the Torah, "Take care lest you forget the Lord your God and fail to keep his commandments, his rules, and his laws, which I enjoin upon you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold has increased, and everything you own has prospered, beware lest your heart grow haughty, and you forget the Lord your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, who fed you in the wilderness with manna. And you say to yourselves, my own power and the might of my own hand have won me this wealth. Remember, it is the Lord your God who gives you the power to get wealth." So when we think we are doing pretty well, we're commanded to remember that we had some pretty powerful help in getting there. These several reasons for remembering our history, that we would not even be here if God had not nurtured our ancestors, that we would own nothing if we were still slaves, and that we owe all our accomplishments to God, lead to yet another reason for remembering, that we should be moved to take steps to provide for those less fortunate than ourselves in society. Our experience as slaves should remind us of the bitterness and despair. This memory should cause us to make sure that our society provides for all of its disadvantaged members. Surely it is best to provide jobs for anyone who can work. Surely it is best to provide meaningful tasks for as many people as we can, so they can feel productive and worthwhile, so they can have self-esteem and feel that their life has meaning. But some people may not be employable for a variety of reasons. Some people may need job training or just some temporary support to get them back on their feet. In any case, our tradition teaches us that we cannot leave behind those who are less fortunate than we are. Over and over again, the Torah reminds us to care for the disadvantaged in our society. Over and over again, it tells us that we have a duty to do so, because we should remember what it's like to be disadvantaged, because we ourselves were once slaves. At the end of last week's Torah portion, we read, "You shall not subvert the rights of the stranger or the fatherless. You shall not take a widow's garment and pawn. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt and that the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I enjoin you to observe this commandment." And then the Torah continues, "When you reap the harvest in your field and overlook a sheaf in the field, don't go back and get it. It shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings. And when you glean the olives from your olive trees, don't go back over and get more. The remaining olives shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And when you gather the grapes of your vineyard, Don't go back and pick it over again. Those remaining grapes should go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Why? Always remember that you are a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore do I enjoin you to observe this commandment. And in this morning's Torah portion, as Ellery mentioned, the very next commandment after the ritual of bringing the first fruits to the temple, the commandment to tithe, to set aside 1/10 of all our earnings that we make and give it to the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that they also may eat their fill in your settlements. Even our Torah portion today seems to connect the requirement to remember the Exodus with the requirement to care for those less fortunate in our society. We do not live in temple times, but we do live in a land flowing with milk and honey, right here in America. The Jewish community in our country has generally done quite well. That's not to say that there are no poor Jews today. There certainly are, as we all know. But generally, Jews today live a better life than our immigrant ancestors did. And thankfully, we do tend to be philanthropic and generous with the fruits of our labor. Perhaps we do so because we have a very long tradition of caring for those in need, a tradition that dates back to the biblical times and to the verses we read this morning. But nevertheless, there is a very real human tendency to think that our achievements and accomplishments are the results of nothing more than the fruits of our own labor, and that we have achieved our status or position today solely and entirely by our own industrious efforts, or by the clever and daring skill which we have exercised in the business world. This human tendency is also recorded in the Bible. Lest you say to yourselves, my own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me. So we are warned to remember our history with God, from the almost inconsequential family clan of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to the millions of Jews today. And we especially remember our own slavery and our exodus from Egypt, so that we will sympathize with those less fortunate than us, and so that we will recognize that everything ultimately comes from God, and it is our continuing duty to give back to our society what we can, to those who desperately need food, clothing, and shelter, and to the institutions that provide the needs of our society as a whole, and for the needs of the Jewish community in particular. At this season, as we prepare for the High Holy Days, let us all rededicate our efforts to continue this precious commandment, the commandment to remember that we were slaves in Egypt. Now we are servants of the Holy One, who expects us to care for each other and to care for our fellow human beings. Shabbat Shalom and an early Shana Tova.
Thank you, Rabbi Morgen, for an important message, especially as we prepare for the high holidays. And we're now ready to continue our service as we begin the Musaf section. We rise, page 184.